That's interesting that you mentioned objectives. So, what do you think is the starting point, when you're trying to frame the right set of objectives? Because, the two components, one is addressing the internal piece of it, and the other is, CMOs definitely managing agencies, right? And objectives for agencies are going to be a little bit different. So, how do you think that should be addressed?
Well, I think it's actually one objective. I don't think you should fragment it into multiple objectives depending on which entities you're working with. I think for CMOs, the return on marketing investment requirement is one good way to start, but needless to say, they need to understand exactly what they want to achieve. And once they know what exactly it is that they want to achieve and how much they're willing to pay to achieve that, then they would be briefing their agencies and whatnot on the exact same objectives. And they would have to emphasize to their partners, agencies and so on, that these activities, whatever they are there to support those objectives, not the other way around. So I think that's the best answer I can give in a short sentence about that.
Sure. So you also mentioned earlier, about retention. And what do you think is the difference when it comes to B2B or B2C? And how do you think, is it the same for both, according to your opinion? And what approach should they be taking?
I think there's varied forms of retention programs. And in some industries, needless to say, it's more difficult than others. And the natural length of a customer relationship in some industries is much longer than others. Let's take telcos, probably have the hardest job of keeping a customer for a long lifetime, whereas if you look at the B2B, big machineries and stuff like that would have a long customer lifetime, sort of inherited in how they do business. But for both parties, I think it all starts with communication. It starts by recognizing that I am a customer, and understanding what type of customer I am and what kind of needs I would have in order to be able to expand my business with that brand and so on. That's where it starts. But as you know, the reality is when we look at retention, that although in surveys you ask CMOs how they are prioritizing their budget between acquisition and retention, very often you get answers that would suggest that about half of it is spent on retention, half of it on acquisition. Now that's what people say in surveys, but reality is that it's probably more of 80-20, if not more, that more than 80% of the budget goes towards acquisition and 20% or less goes towards retention. If we're looking at this across the board, all types of industries and on a global perspective. And I think we can start by just allocating some more resources, whether we're in B2C or B2B, on retention. We can start by defining lifetime value. Yes, we have waiters or whatever they are, but cleaning personnel, fixing things here, that's okay. So, once you start looking at this from a financial perspective, it makes a whole lot more sense to be doing more retention type of activities than acquisition type of activities. Our cameraman is right now very distracted by what's going on behind me here, but I'm so intensely focused on the camera, thinking we're live, but we're not.
We are.
We are live,
Yeah.
okay, we're live, okay.
Yeah. So talking about databases, we all know it's important, and I think some of them are doing it right, some of them are not. And what do you think are some of those must-dos when it comes to data management?
That's a very good question. I think in terms of must-dos in a short sentence, the first thing is to profile your audience. In other words, understand exactly what you want to know about each individual that lands in your database, so to speak. You probably want to differentiate that, so you might have one profile for potential clients or customers and a different profile for customers. And when we talk about customers, you may want to profile trial customers differently than those you really believe truly are committed to doing business with you. I think that's where it starts, and that's where most fails. They don't have clearly defined objectives about why they even want to build a database, other than being able to spam people with their email or text messages. But understanding precisely how useful these different data components can, or different components of a profile can be in terms of communication, and understanding what that means in terms of the efficiency of that communication. So if you just know the basics, like a name and let's say it's B2C, an email address and where that person lives, you really don't know anything. So it wouldn't reflect in your communication that you have this information, unless you think it's valuable to tell people that we are sending you an email to this email address. It's hardly valuable to the consumer. So understanding that if you ask people for date of birth, you need to understand, if you're asking for a date of birth, you need to understand how you're going to use that information in a valuable way to the recipient. If you ask about preferences, so is it the red shirt or the blue shirt that is the preference, then you need to understand how that's going to impact the communication with that particular individual.
Sure. And there is this whole issue about, big data, small data going on. And how do you think marketers should approach that and make best utilization of, the newest trend within marketing?
Suresh, you know this very well. There's so much buzz going on. It's like every year 5-10 new buzzwords, and big data has been one of the biggies for some years now. I think when we look at big data, sure, it has a place, but most businesses can't handle small data. And in my opinion, if you can't handle small data, and that's what we talked about just in another video, you will have no chance, and of handling big data. And that's where it all starts. Big data makes a lot of sense if you can actually trust the data you have. If you know the level of accuracy is, I don't know what the percentage should be, but let's say 95, 97, 99% accuracy, then it makes a whole lot of sense. So your mining or your analysis will help you tremendously, as well as will the direct communication that you'd be able to have with your audience. But until you can actually manage small data, you can forget about big data.
Hey Michael, thank you so much for spending your valuable time giving us these insights.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much.